Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 7 verses. And this Proverbs, as you may know, is a book of wisdom. And it's a series of sayings, often one verse totally unrelated to the next, but just offering tidbits of wisdom for people to live their lives by. And this is the introduction to that, the reminder of what this book of Proverbs is about, and especially what the core message is. These are the wise sayings of Solomon, David's son, Israel's king, written down so we'll know how to live well and right, to understand what life means and where it's going. A manual for living, for learning what's right and just and fair, to teach the inexperienced the ropes, and give our young people a grasp on reality. There's something here also for seasoned men and women, still a thing or two for the experienced to learn. Fresh wisdom to probe and penetrate the rhymes and reasons of wise men and women. The first step in learning is to honor the Lord. Only fools thumb their noses at such wisdom and learning. And our second reading is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16. Jesus also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who was informed of accusations that his manager was wasting his assets. So he called the manager in and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your administration, because you can no longer be my manager. Then the manager said to himself, what should I do, since my master is taking my position away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm too ashamed to beg. I know what to do, so that when I am put out of my management, people will welcome me into their homes. So he contacted the master's debtors one by one. He asked the first, how much do you owe the master? The man replied, 100 measures of oil. The manager said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and write down 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? The second man replied, 100 measures of wheat. The manager said to him, take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their contemporaries than the people of light. This is a bizarre parable. I can always tell how challenging or difficult a parable is when I hit Sunday morning and I look at the sermon that I prepared and I go, no, that's not going to fly. And I end up rewriting it at 8 in the morning. Now, I only did that slightly today, but it is truly a bizarre parable. Here's a business owner who finds out that his office manager has been skimming off of the top, has been cheating him. And so he calls the manager in and he says, your job is finished, but before you go, you've got 2 weeks to get the books in order because I'm going to audit them. And he knows right off that he's in deep trouble. He's too proud to beg. He's too weak to work. So what is he to do? How is he to survive? That's the question that comes up in his head. Then he has an idea. He calls in some of the boss's biggest customers. Have I got a deal for you, he says. The plan is a simple one. He cuts their bills in half. He destroys the paper trail. And then he writes out new invoices for them. Now, when the auditors come into the office a couple of weeks later to check out things and to see how the books have been doctored and all of that, no one could prove anything. He has covered his tracks so well. The business people he helped by reducing their debt certainly aren't going to say anything. They're profiting, they're benefiting from his dishonesty. So why would they give him up? So no one says anything. No one can prove anything. Of course, when the owner looks at the doctored books, he knows exactly what has taken place, but he too has no proof. There is nothing he can point to say, you have cheated me out of my wealth. He has been conned and manipulated and outmaneuvered by the office manager. And so there's only one thing he can do. He says to the man, I have to admit, you were pretty smart. You got me. Now get out. Now, up to this point in the story, it all makes perfect sense. Maybe even more so in the last few years because we've been through the meltdown on Wall Street and the subprime mortgage issue that came up and all of the crises that caused, not just within North America, but right around the world. We've seen the collapse of Greece. We've seen the issues going on in Spain and all of the problems that countries have been dealing with trying to recover from the financial crisis that was caused by people manipulating the system. It was caused by people cooking the books. It was caused by people who were looking out only for themselves and their own benefit. And so we've seen that. We have seen how a group of determined people can manipulate billions of dollars and leave ruin in their wake and really not be held to account at all. And then when the governments bail out the failed companies, the managers, the people who created the problem to begin with, all made sure that they had contracts that said, regardless of what happens to their company, they still get their year-end bonus. And undoubtedly, if you were like me, you just reached the end of that whole experience tearing your hair out and feeling so frustrated at the fact that they got away with it. So when we read the story of the dishonest manager, we're able to nod and say to ourselves, we've heard this story before. We have lived through this story. We don't like the story. In fact, we despise the story, but we have to admit there is not a thing we can do about it. But here's where it gets really bizarre. Jesus is standing beside us, watching the same scenario play out, and he's going, oh, these guys were some sharp cookies, weren't they? Look at the way they screwed us all over. Did you see how the manager saved himself? How he was able to take all of the things that he had done that were dishonest and yet still profit by it? He is an impressive individual. And when we read this parable and we read Jesus' response to the dishonesty of master, of the manager, our response is all, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would Jesus be praising the con man? Why would Jesus be expressing admiration for the one who is able to cheat the system? Is he telling us that we as Christians should therefore be equally dishonest, that we should manipulate the system around us, that we should take advantage of neighbors and friends in order to profit by it? Is he telling us that we should be the ones who are out there playing the system, using our friendships and our relationships in order to profit ourselves? After all, if we are thinking about that, and we are talking about stewardship, this is a stewardship series that we're going through. If we can find a way to cheat people, to con them, to get their money, to take advantage of them, we might not have to ever preach another stewardship sermon ever again, because we would be profitable. We'd have more than enough money in the bank. Who cares if we gain the disdain of the people around us? Who cares if anybody out there got really upset at what was going on in here? I don't know. How is it that Jesus is able to praise the con man, to show his admiration for this person who had cheated the system? Well, obviously he's not praising the man because of his dishonesty. He's not praising him because he's a con man. He's not praising him because he's taking advantage of other people. He is pointing to the man as an example of someone who has single-minded devotion to a cause. Now, the cause in this case happens to be himself, but Jesus' point here is pretty simple. He says, here is someone who knows how to look after himself, looking for every angle, every scheme, every opportunity that would provide him with a chance for success, a chance for survival, because that's really what it's about. He wants to survive. So he was able to focus all of his cunning, heart, mind, and soul, to the service of his God, which in this case happens to be money, happens to be survival. What if we, Jesus says, the citizens of the kingdom of God, were able to show such single-minded and complete devotion to our cause, to the cause of being Christ's hands within the community? Our call, our Christian service, is not to change the world. It is not to right every wrong. It's not to save the day. It's not to redeem the unredeemable. Our call is to be single-minded in our purpose, Jesus is telling us. To pay attention to and give service to the holiness of the ordinary. To see the sacred within our daily existence, and to go after that sacred quality with every ounce of our being. To turn the ordinary experiences of life into holy encounters with the presence of Christ. And so, it's not a case of us as a congregation going out into the world and doing grand, bold gestures that result in the total conversion of a community. It is a case, Jesus is telling us, of being like the manager, being of a single mind to fulfill the goal for which we have been called, which is to be Christ's hands in the community. And so we go out into the world, we go out into our day-to-day existence to give a cup of cold water to someone who needs it, to share a word of comfort with somebody who is grieving, to write a note of kindness to someone who needs encouragement, to help a child build a soapbox car, to read a story to a child at night, like a father or mother would, to show a sense of compassion and kindness to everybody that we encounter, to visit a nursing home, to visit someone who's shut in, to take a loaf of bread around to somebody just to communicate to them, you are part of our community and you matter. To teach Sunday school, as Brenda and Kathy have done. To share a meal with someone who needs companionship. To go to choir practice. To run the children's games at field day. To be a caring dad. Those instances of sacred service are what make up our purpose as Christ's people. They're not grand, they're not glorious, not world-changing, but they are vibrant examples of our stewardship of what we have, of the faith we have, the belief in self and church and Christ's message that we possess. Jesus' message isn't to mimic the dishonest manager's willingness to con or manipulate to achieve what he wants, but it is to enter into the Christian life with equal passion. To enter into the Christian life with equal determination and focus, just as the dishonest manager did to preserve his life. If we can do that, Jesus is saying, we are then able to turn our hearts and souls and minds and bodies. We are able to turn our wealth and our resources to the task of serving God by serving one another. In other words, we become true stewards of what God has given us. Because you see, stewardship isn't about money. It's never about money. We've confused the fact, as we talked about last week, we've confused the fact that stewardship isn't about putting money into the offering plate. It's not about balancing the budget. It's not about how much you give week to week. It's not about the time you volunteer. It's not about the skills you share or the resources you provide. Stewardship is not about the amount of things that you offer. Stewardship is about the ability to give ourselves, our focus, our mission, our passion, our determination to being the people we have been called to be. Unlike the dishonest manager, we do not have the things we have, money, skills, talent, time, in order to ensure our future, in order to survive. Stewardship is not about survival. We have those things, those gifts, in order to be the people whom Christ has inspired us to be. When we allow our stewardship of who we are to shape our mission, to define our sense of purpose, to inspire our belief in ourselves, we come to understand that everything we have, all we possess, including our money, is not to ensure our survival, not to provide us with a safe place, but it is to empower us to go into the community with a life-changing message. Our stewardship is to give our very best and to give our very all in order to be Christ's hands in the community. We are true and inspired stewards of the gifts we possess only when we are prepared to give it all, to risk it all, in order to live as Christ intends.